Thank you for joining us on Quantum Healing Today, a healing podcast. Today we have Suzanne Spooner, a QHHT Level 3 practitioner, and she has discovered TAUK, the Art of Universal Knowing. It is short for this beautiful, beautiful channel that she has created and technique she has developed, and I would love to hear more, and I know that more people would love to hear about this. And even if you're not spiritually advanced or intuitive or telepathic, you're still able to use this. And it's easy, accessible to everybody. So today we have Suzanne. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for inviting me, Melanie.
Yeah. So let's get started. Let's hear about your story and how you discovered TAUK and where it has brought you today.
Okay, well, it's a fun story. It started back, I'm gonna guess the original, I don't know what you want. I sent out a little, I sent out a request to the universe back in probably 2009. And it was very, very, very simple. I just wanted to help people. I wanted people to come to me, but I didn't want to give them their answers. I wanted them to be able to find their own answers within them. And I had no idea what that meant, but that was the thought. I was in my car driving. I still remember having it. And I just let it go. I think at that point, I was in my own personal life. I was waking up and very interested in spirituality and metaphysics. And I had great friends who were already had great psychic abilities. And, mostly I just wanted to help others. So I believe it was several months down the road. It was the end of September 2009. I had taken a class called Spiritual Response Therapy, or SRT. My friends had taken it and told me how cool it was. So I thought, sure, I'll learn it. And SRT is a process of clearing out energies from this lifetime and others, kind of finding the root source of issues using the charts and a pendulum. So those are the tools, many, many charts and a pendulum. So that was about my first time of using a pendulum for that class. A friend was giving it. It was several days of class time and then practicing. And I really took to it. It just seemed to come very natural to me, which surprised me because these charts were very detailed. There's, I think, 26 charts in the class to use, but somehow it just locked in, and I was loving it. So back, I think it was September 27th. At the time, I had kids at home that were still in school, and they had all left. My husband had left for work. It's just me and the dog at the house. And I decided to get my charts and my pendulum out, and I was going to practice clearing energy from the house and learning the skills that I had just acquired. So that morning, all of a sudden, while I was doing that work, I strongly felt the presence of my dad. Now, he had passed about 10 years, about 10 years earlier. He passed in 1991 of a suicide. And I had felt him with me since his passing. We were very, very close. Obviously, a very sad end to his life. But that morning, I just felt him super, super strong. And, I'm sitting there with this beautiful rose quartz pendulum and all these charts. And I'm just thinking, wow, it'd be great if I could communicate with him. And so I didn't want to get myself too excited about this prospect, which is funny because that's not me. I'm a glass half full girl. But I was really tampering down my expectations because I just thought, maybe, but I doubt this will work. And so I just took my pendulum, and I had, because of SRT, I had my directions of yes and no, and I knew which way those went. And I held the pendulum up, and I just asked first, is there anybody here in the room with me? And my pendulum started swinging this huge yes. I mean, it was kinking the chain, big yes. And I'm like, okay, figure this out. And at the time, the SRT isn't for receiving messages. That's not the process for it. But I was thinking, how in the heck could I communicate here? And so I thought, well, I could draw up a letter chart. And then my very next thought was, oh, yuck, I don't want this to be like Ouija, yuck. And then I thought, wait, just settle down, make this your highest intention for the greatest good. Maybe nothing will happen. Maybe something will. And so I settled down and I drew up this really crappy letter chart because I'm not artistic in that way. But it had the letters on it. And I thought, well, what the heck? Let's just try it. And I held the pendulum over the letter chart, and it started to spell out words. And I'm like, what? Am I making this up? Am I making the pendulum move? But I mean, the words that were coming through weren't in my mind. I mean, I didn't think I was making it up. And I happened to have a piece of paper and a pen right beside me. So I decided to start writing down what was coming through. I'd write a few words down, pick the pendulum back up, put it back over the letter chart, and it would continue right where it had left off. So here's the very first message that came through. It said, easy to translate with this medium, ready to begin this odyssey. This is it. And I asked, am I working with my high self for the greater good? I wanted to cover all bases here. And the message starts to spell out again. It says, yes, oh yes, love. Time will tell. Cusp of awareness. Begin soon. You will be able to measure gateway to other consciousness. And I'm like, what the heck just happened here? And I had to just set the pendulum down, get up, go do some things, like just to wrap my mind around what just happened. I thought, this is probably an anomaly. This probably won't happen again, but that was really, really cool. And I have no idea where that message came from. That doesn't even sound like me. And so now I don't remember if it was later that night or the next morning. I think it was the next morning, actually. I sat down to see if this anomaly would happen again. And it did. And this time it was a message from my brother, who had been miscarried ahead of me. It was a late miscarriage a few years before I was born. And it was a very sweet message to our mom, which was amazing. And I was sitting there trying to digest that one. I mean, that wasn't expected at all. And then my sweet dad came through with the very, very first message to me. And it was very, very short. It was only 3 lines. It said, hi, Zippy. And Zippy was my dad's nickname for me. Only person who's ever called me Zippy. And when I spelled out Zippy, I have to tell you, it was like a physical heartburst. My cheeks went bright red. It was the most amazing feeling of love. And then just another quick little sentence, take care of Jack. Jack is our lab. We still have him, who was sitting beside me, and put love to mom. Kind of a funny way of saying that, put love to mom. And which was very sweet. My parents were divorced, but they were lifelong friends and friends to the end of his life. So that was the first message from my dad. And from there, every time I sat down, there would be messages. So that's how it began.
Beautiful. So before you started this, what was your perspective on dying? And has TAUK changed your perspective?
It has, in the most beautiful ways. I was open to reincarnation at that point, for sure. I had, earlier, in my teens, I was really fascinated with Edgar Casey and Shirley MacLaine, people like that. So I was open to it. And of course, when somebody close to you passes, and in such a sad way as suicide, I spent a lot of time thinking about that, hoping that he was okay and knew how much he was loved, and so sorry that he, chose to exit at that time in that way. So it was definitely a belief that I held, that there was reincarnation. Now, one of the coolest things that happened right after this phenomena of TAUK started happening to me is he started coming through very consistently. So when I wasn't doing a message, I was thinking about it. And, there's, I've had dreams with him where they definitely felt like dream visits, which was able to ease my heart up a bit. But now I had questions and I knew he had answers. So when I wasn't getting a message, I would be thinking of what would I ask him? What do I want to know? And one of these days I sat down and I wanted to ask him, what was it like when he passed? I wanted to know what his experience was. And he beautifully laid it out about, he was just so sad, and he felt that there's no other way. And he, sadly thought he was doing us a favor. So sad. And he said when he left, he went to his perception of not a good place, feeling that he wasn't worthy of God. But he said, being the eternal dad, he says, I didn't stay there long. That made me so sad to think that he would have put himself in a situation like that, of course. But he says, I didn't stay there long. And then I reached out and knew that I wanted to be with God. And he says, it changed instantly. And I was in this beautiful garden, and I rested for a while, which is so interesting because in QHHT, we hear about this resting space often in sessions when people have gone from one life back to the other side. And he says, then after I rested a while, I started creating my heaven. And he says, this is important to know that you create what you consider your heaven. So start thinking about how you want it to be. It'll be easier for you. I had to do it, from that point. So that was cool. Then later in these conversations, I had started sharing these messages with my family, my friends, that I thought, the ones that would be open to this. And I have a nephew that was born well after my dad passed, my youngest sister's son, who looks identical to our dad. I mean, just flipping identical. And so, those of us that are open to reincarnation are just like, what the heck? Do you think this one is dad? And how can that be? And I'm getting messages from him. How can that be? And so, after one of these great conversations with my sisters, I went up to do a message, and my dad came through, and I'm like, so we wonder, is he you? And he says, he is. And I said, well, wait, how can this happen? Because you're giving me messages from the other side, and he's living this whole other life, his own life, but looks so much like you. And he says, my little sister and he hadn't completed what they needed. So he's come back so that those two souls can have this completion. And he says, I can give you messages because there's a part of me here. And he gave this beautiful analogy that I'm like an orange. There's lots of sections connected to the core. And I'm like, well, that's so cool. And I'm like, well, if there's a part of you there that can give me messages, and there's a part of you in my nephew continuing what you need to do, there must be a part of me where you're at. It's just trying to figure this all out. And he's like, of course there is. You're not just Suzanne. There's many, many aspects of you in different times and places. So, it expanded my awareness reincarnation and what we are. It was beautiful. It was a really mind expanding experience. And this was all happening to me years before I learned about QHHT. So it was a great prep for taking that part of the journey too.
Yeah, definitely. I can definitely see where that can give you a different spin, especially for those who feel and believe that once you die, and that's the end. But really, there's so much more.
Yeah, way more than I think we can, just barely wrap our heads around.
Yes, yes. Everything has a process and step. It's amazing.
It is.
So, who have you connected with along your journey?
Oh my gosh. Well, so that very first message that I read to you, I didn't even think to ask who it was. I mean, my head was just so befuddled over the whole thing. Now I would say that was the God message. God's creator spirit, whatever name you want to put to it, it's just a title. So I would say right off the bat, that second day, my dad started coming through. And he was kind of my regular contact for quite a while. But other family members and friends who had passed had started coming through. I had a coworker, a dear friend, who was murdered, and he came through, and it was an amazing conversation. And at one point, I asked him, "How is it for you to communicate this way, through this pendulum and chart?" And it was so interesting. He says it was like learning another language, but on a vibrational level. And I thought, well, that's interesting, because vibration is what moves a pendulum. It's our energetic field that's moving it. So I thought that was really interesting. But besides family, oh my gosh, I started having, oh my gosh, this is so funny. I had an ET that came through, and I'm like, what are you, what? And he was awesome. He had this really great sense of humor. He said that his name was KIG, K-I-G, and it was an acronym for Kindred Imagination for Growth. Oh my gosh, he's awesome. And so, when I would sit down for a message, I would never specify typically who I wanted to come through. I just thought whoever's going to come through is who I need to talk to. And I appreciated that. My grandma that came through is actually the one who gave me the name, The Art of Universal Knowing, because I didn't know what it was at the very beginning. So I thought it was like a form of SRT because I just had no point of reference. And let me tell you about this grandma. In her life on Earth, she was quite a trailblazer for the time. This was back during the Korean War. My grandpa was away at war, and she opened up a restaurant in their small town. And she was probably one of the first businesswomen of the area. So she was just a really neat lady. And when she came through, she was kind of like, I'm going to help you understand what this is. And it's called Art of Universal Knowing. And I'm like, heck, that's a cool name. And I was like, I don't know what that is, but that's really a neat name. And she says, you're going to be teaching this to others. And again, I was just befuddled. I'm like, I don't even know how I'm doing this. How in the heck am I supposed to teach this? And she says, we're going to show you. It's going to all come together. It's going to be fine. And I thought, okay, well, that's fine. And so I was talking to my SRT teacher, a great friend of mine. Her name is Malabika Shah, a beautiful soul. And so I was sharing her with these messages because I'm like, what the heck, look at what's happening. And I was talking to her on the phone. I said, my grandma says that it's called Art of Universal Knowing. And I didn't want to, I think I was actually emailing her. And I said, I don't want I was typing all of that out, Art of Universal Knowing. And she goes, okay. And I said, I'm going to call it AUK, A-U-K, because then I don't have to type it all out. And she's so funny. She sends back, she goes, AUK. She goes, that's awkward. She goes, put a T in front of it. The Art of Universal Knowing, TAUK. TAUK was what you're doing. You're talking. And I'm like, brilliant. That's great. So that's how it became the Art of Universal Knowing. It was Malabika and my grandma Vernus.
Love it. So it was a beautiful collaboration.
It is. And here was the fun, cool part is I could be, away from my house in my car. I call it my thinking spot. This is where I get a lot of downloads. And I'd be thinking about like, how does this work and how could I teach it? And I wonder if I did it like this. And then I'd sit down when I was back home with my chart and they'd say, okay, you were wondering how this works. Here's how it works. And you're right, it was this great collaboration. I'd be thinking the questions, in come the answers the next time I sat down. Here's how the chart came to be, the real TAUK chart. Not soon after, I was sitting at my kitchen table and I was getting a message. And my husband came home unexpectedly. And I'm like, oh, heck, I hadn't told him anything about this. And he's an engineer and he's going to think, he already thinks I'm nuts. So this is just going to, put him over the top. He wasn't into all the spiritual stuff that I was into. And so he came in and I had my crappy letter chart right in front of me and I kind of covered it up like, oh, hey, what are you doing home? You're not supposed to be home. And he's so perceptive. And he's like, what are you doing? And I'm like, nothing. Do you need something? Can I help you? He comes over and he's like, what is in front of you? And I'm like, okay, you're not going to get this. You're not going to believe in it, but I somehow I'm getting messages. And he looks at this really badly drawn letter chart and he says, that is atrocious. I'm like, I know. And and he goes, what are you trying to make it look like? And I said, like a circle with letters on it. And he goes, well, I can work that up in my CAD program at work. And I'm like, oh, how weird. Okay. Well, here's what I want it to look like. And I want it to have a center. And he's like, what is this? And I'm like, look at these messages. I'm like, I don't know what it is, but they're coming through me. And bless his heart, I know he didn't mean this mean, but he looks at one of the messages and he goes, whoa. He goes, that is definitely not you. And I'm like, because it was so deep. And I said, right. I said, that's what I mean. It's messages are coming through me, not from me. And off he went and he came home that night with the TAUK letter chart and I've never changed it. It's perfect. And now it's printed up. It's nice on thick paper. But I literally beside me here have the original one. It was so bad. I'll send you a picture of it.
Yeah. Do you have I guess what size is it? And is it convenient to have a travel size?
Well, yeah, you sure could. So the size that I made it's a little bit bigger than, I'm setting it here. It's just a little bit bigger than a normal size piece of paper. And I did that to make the spaces for each letter just a little bit bigger. Mm-hmm. If people take the class online on the website, there's a PDF and you can print it out just on regular printer paper. But I always recommend, take it to Kinko's or somewhere like that and ask them to blow it up just a little bit just to make it easier. Okay. But yeah, you could do it on a little one. You just have to have, pretty good command of the pendulum. So sometimes people will, if they're taking the class, there's an opportunity to order a rose quartz pendulum, which I'll talk about in a minute, why it's rose quartz, and a chart, and they get the class. So it's kind of like a package deal. In that case, I send them one of the official TAUK charts and a pendulum very similar to what I've always used since that time. So I'll explain that. So for the SRT class, not knowing what was coming, I picked a rose quartz pendulum to use for that because I just like pink. That's honestly why I picked it. Now, so that's the pendulum I had as I started figuring out this technique. And one day I thought, I'm kind of tired of my rose quartz pendulum. I happened to have an amethyst pendulum there that I had bought. So I started to do a message with my dad with the amethyst. And it was the craziest thing. It was as if the pendulum was behaving really oddly. It was almost like, the best way I can describe it is like it was kind of like floating over the letters. It was just behaving much, much differently than the rose quartz. I'm like, that's weird. And I'm trying to get this message from my dad, and I can tell that he's saying, switch it back. And I'm like, whoa, sorry, I hope I didn't do something wrong. And so I grab my rose quartz pendulum, and it starts behaving properly. And he says, it's the wrong frequency. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And he says, the rose quartz crystal is the best frequency for this type of work. It holds the right frequency. Other crystals are great for other things. The amethyst crystal wasn't cooperating well. I don't know how else to say that. It wasn't finding its frequency. So ever since then, I've only done a message with rose quartz, and that's what I have on the website. That's what I recommend using. It just has, and you think about that, rose quartz is for the heart and the third eye and communication. So it makes it quite perfect. So that's what I recommend using.
Nice. That makes sense to use the rose quartz to me. I feel because amethyst maybe heated up more as compared to the rose quartz is more natural and cooling. So it's a higher,
that could be it.
Higher frequency. So I'm a rock nerd.
Okay. Well, I wasn't, so I was just like, okay, I'm sure that wasn't a coincidence. So I picked up rose quartz. I think everybody was getting things in line for this experience to happen.
Yeah. Have you experimented with any other types of crystals or quartz?
Nope. I have kept pure to the rose quartz just because I know that works best.
Nice. Beautiful. I love it. And so how has this changed your life for the better?
Well, I think, like that first request that I put out, I wanted to help people. I wanted them to come to me, and I wanted them to find their own answers. So from 2009 to 2012, when I found Dolores, I love that. When I started figuring out the process for teaching it, that was hilarious. I mean, it was just back and forth with these guides and messages that were coming through. Do it this way, try it that way, and I come back, well, what do you think about this? And they're like, yeah, that works. It was just the greatest collaboration. And so once I thought I had a system, then I reached out to one of my best friends who I knew was really open. I'm like, what do you think? Do you want to, here's what's happening. Do you want to try it? And she's like, yeah. And I'm like, okay, no promises. This may not work at all, but I think it might. And lo and behold, she started getting messages. And so that expanded to more friends. And then I got a little office so that I could do groups of people at once. So once I understood that this was going to work, like people could find their own answers within them, that made me just so happy. I could just show them the process, and they could get their own messages. That just thrilled me.
Yeah, I see that as its own talk therapy, and do you see what I mean? Because if people are able to connect with other people that have passed in their own way, for me, I think that is the best thing to do other than going to somebody else, to a psychic or me.
Right. Because, I've got great friends that are amazing gifted psychics, and I'll use them. I'll go to them every once in a while. But, even the best psychic, intuitive, the information is still being filtered through them. And I think, with me, I could do that. And I sometimes, in their messages, I'd say, oh yeah, I think I know what that means. And, that could be right. But when you're receiving the message directly, you're the filter.
Yes.
And I think that's what makes the experience so pure for so many that have taken the class and used the messages in their highest and best ways to get their own clarity. I've tapped into my own high self many times. Lots of guides have come through. I've tapped into the high self of my kids, that are obviously still here, just to get some clarity on, if they were having challenges as they were growing up. I mean, it's the opportunity of who you're tapping into is endless. So it makes it so much fun.
Right. Did you ever show this to Dolores?
Gosh, did I? We talked about it, I'm sure. Through it came this guided meditation that I have called the Universal Mind Project. That was channeled through TAUK. And at one of her classes, she did allow me to give that group meditation. It's actually, there's a website for it. It's just its own little thing. And she allowed me to do that. And, here is the thing, that was such a sweet thing for her to do. I think we were at the end of the day of class, and anybody that wanted to hang around and do the meditation, were allowed to. And I thought, okay, Dolores is done teaching, she's going to head out. And so I was just getting into the meditation, and I think my eyes were closed too while I was walking people through it. And I opened my eyes up, and there's Dolores at the back of the room, just, watching and taking it all in. And that just swelled my heart. I was so happy that she was open to, sharing her stage and watching that process come through.
Right. Have you connected with her through TAUK?
Oh, yes. Oh, my gosh. Yeah. Especially, oh, my gosh. She passed unexpectedly. And so there were a lot of messages going back and forth right afterwards. And, she'll come through anytime. And, as she pops into QHHT sessions. And, it's again, the field is the field of possibility is endless. So it's all possible.
Yes. Beautiful. Could you do an example today?
Of a message?
Yeah.
Yeah, of course I can. Hold on here. I just gotta shift things around here. Okay. So I've got my pendulum and my chart here. I'm just clearing my space. That's what I do every time. Just clear out anything that isn't in the highest and best frequency. And it's done doing that. And then I just ask to download love, light, wisdom, protection. It's done doing that. So let's see what we get here. I have no idea who will come through. I'll just ask. All right. So who would like to come through? Okay. Okay, they're calling themselves friends in high places. So this is who the message is from. That has never happened before. Friends in high places. Okay, here comes the message. I'll be quiet here for just a second. They say, we are the guides. We are the guides of Earth. We are sending you all the highest and the lightest, I think that's a play on word, lightest, the lightest love imaginable. You, meaning all, you are in a very changeable time on the planet. Focus on the timeline and experience you wish to have. This is the most exciting time on your planet. We are with you all, and you will come through the changes well. Have faith, not fear. You are deeply loved. And the pendulum stops, and that's the end of the message. Beautiful. What do you think about that one?
Oh, that was cool. I wasn't expecting to do a message, but having to, bring everything up because I wasn't sure how we were going to do this, and that's great. I think it's a really important understanding that we're not being victimized. It's our choice on what timeline and what experience we're having, and I think everybody's manifesting everything really fast and easy right now, for the better or for the worse. So. Yes. Good reminder to stay, positive and not focus on fear.
Yes, there's a lot of transitions and changes right now.
Yes.
The awakening is going to happen a little bit more quickly going forward. So I think it's very, very important message. That's beautiful. Thank you for doing that.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Thank them. I'm just who it comes through.
Yes, thank you, guides of the earth. Thank you. So how does one get started in this and learning?
Well, there's actually two ways. So there's the traditional class, the online class that you can take through the website, theartofuniversalknowing.com. It's very inexpensive. I make it that way so that anybody can do this. I don't manage that website. I do have somebody that takes care of that. So it essentially goes to taking care of that person. So you can go online anytime you want to and do just the class only. You can do the package where you get the pendulum and the chart. But back a year ago, when all this craziness with the pandemic started, and people were just so, lost with what in the heck is happening here. I decided to do online or like a Zoom class and put it out there. And things have changed. I think when I originally did the class, that was, I think, in 2010, we're at a different place, frequency-wise, energy-wise. It was a little bit more of a regimented structure to how you get connected in to have a clear message, not get lower energy coming in, yada, yada. And I when I decided to do this Zoom class, I had been thinking on this. The website had been redone. The videos from the original class are still on there. They're pretty old. But I was actually getting ready to redo those videos just as the pandemic started. And then my video person at the time lived out of state, and that wasn't going to happen. So this was kind of, I was just thinking, how can we make this available to more people right now? And so I kind of revamped the class a little bit in relation to where I thought the energy was on the planet in 2020 versus 2010. And so it's a little bit simplified class, but it's been very effective, and that's free. So anybody can go to my YouTube channel and find those TAUK videos. There's two. One is an introduction to it, of how this works and what it is, and the other is actually showing people how to get their own messages, how to make their own charts. So that's available too, and I'll give you those links, the two video links, and so people can do that anytime they want to. I just recommend that you purchase somewhere a rose quartz pendulum. If you don't happen to have it, don't use other types of crystals to get the best, so that you can have the best, clearest messages. Use rose quartz, and you can draw up your own letter chart much better than my original one. Or they can send, and some people will just ask for a pendulum or a chart or both, and I can send those out to folks now.
Okay, wonderful. And then are there any other do's and don'ts of TAUK?
Not really. It's, I would say just, it's always good to be in a positive frame of mind. Don't be overly stressed when you sit down. That tends to be a little bit more challenging to get a message. For many people that have learned TAUK over the years, that the chart and the pendulum are like the tools that teach you how to do this, and I think it helps people that are worried if they're making it up. You cannot easily move a pendulum letter to letter on purpose. I mean, that actually takes way more effort than doing a original organic message. So I think the pendulum and chart are a great way to start off. Some people will, once they get their feel with this, they'll move and they'll do automatic keyboarding or automatic writing. Maybe that's easier for them. For me, I've always stuck with the pendulum and the chart. It's like a meditative experience when I do that. So I enjoy the process of the chart and the pendulum. It's just, it's individual with what people like to do. As long as the messages are coming in, in very high love level messages, nothing bossy, nothing inappropriate, then you're getting the right message. And if for any reason that lower energy would come in, I tell people I have zero fear towards it. Mm-hmm. It's curious. I tell people, when we're doing TAUK, it's kind of like you could picture a bright light in a dark room. And sometimes, there are lower energies that are just curious, like what's going on over here with all this light? And they might try to come in and alter the message a bit. It's easy to tell when that happens because the message goes off. It's, it's that bossiness or that unkindness. And then I just tell people, just take your pendulum off the chart, clear your space, maybe go take a break, go walk outside in nature. And when you're feeling like you're ready to start, then, do your process of clearing your space and putting protection around it, and then take off again. And that usually is all that's needed. And many people don't even have that lower energy experience at all.
Yeah, and this is definitely a beautiful way for multidimensional communication and healing.
Yeah, it
So
is.
it's very beautiful. And how can this improve someone's life on a daily basis if they were to start using this to improve their lives?
Well, I think it's a way of demonstrating how much bigger we are, how much more connected we are, how much more is around us than what we perceive. So I think it's a great tool of expansion and awareness. I've received very deep messages from the teachers that I've had to like literally graph out to understand the message. So it's always pushed me to expand what I thought. I think that, I tell people, don't use it as a prediction tool. Don't ask if, you're going to marry this person or get that job, because there's a lot of, people can turn left instead of turn right and completely shuffle the deck. But you can ask, how are things set up right at this moment? Is it looking like this is going to happen or that? But we have free will, and this is not meant to override anybody's free will. It's never meant to be a tool for that. So you can't, use a message or a messenger to change somebody's free will or your own. You are in control of your life and your choices. It's a supplement. It's a guide to expand your thinking and awareness, and knowing that you're so much more than what we've been told. That's all it is.
Yes, it definitely will boost your confidence.
I hope so. I just hope it helps us to understand we're so much more than, and so much more connected than what perhaps we've been taught or believed about ourselves.
Yes, that bigger understanding and knowing that we are connected, and we are just fractals. We are pieces of each other. And just like your father, there are pieces of us everywhere that we couldn't even imagine. So we just
Right.
overlap and
Yes.
intersect, and we keep going without even knowing it.
I think you're exactly right.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, thank you.
You're very welcome.
So what else would you like to share about TAUK?
Oh gosh, I think if it resonates with anybody who is listening, it's worth taking a moment to look into and trying it out. Can't hurt, might help. And it's a heck of a lot of fun. I love hearing from people that have taken the class and how the messages have changed them or opened their eyes to new ideas and understandings and beliefs. So I'm really grateful from that time the request went out to when it occurred that morning of September 27th, 2009. I'm grateful that I went for it and kept my mind open to it, and I'm so happy that it's been able to help others.
Yes, thanks. And I can see how this would help individuals to connect with their guides, their angels, and their higher self as well, just as you said earlier. And I think in doing that with practice over time, they won't have to depend on outside resources so much. It will help improve their intuition and telepathy, so that they can eventually get to a point where they might not have to use the tool.
That's so awesome that you brought that up, Melanie, because that's where we're headed. And I think I hear about this in my QHHT sessions all the time from the high selves, that we're on this path of becoming fully aware, meaning that we'll have access to all this knowledge at any time. And I think it's a tool. TAUK is a tool, like QHHT is a tool to tapping into that part of us that knows everything and the collective. And the more that we understand that we are the source of all knowledge, the less dependent we are on the news and the experts, and we take our sovereignty back and realize that we are the source of our knowledge and our healing. And how exciting to be in these really amazing times of change. And when we can use a tool like TAUK to get more clarity on what's really happening around us, and we're not so tunnel visioned into the television story or what other people's fears are around us, it helps us advance more easily and more quickly on our own path.
Yes, I got this visualization of spiritual physical therapy. How some people can use a walker, but this is a talker. Get it?
Oh, that's cute.
So it helps it helps build your spiritual intuition and your strengths and your abilities for that connection with yourself, because
Yeah, absolutely.
source and information comes from you and also through you. So depending on what level you're at, if you're channeling or not channeling. So it's all about growth and expansion.
It is. Yeah, that's a wonderful way of stating it.
Let's go over how people can find you and your website and your YouTube.
Yep. So if you, the website is theartofuniversalknowing.com, or you can also reach it by the acronym TAUK site, SITE.com. Both will get you to the website. My YouTube channel, if you just search Suzanne Spooner TAUK, TAUK, or Suzanne Spooner QHHT, it's the same YouTube channel, and you can find the TAUK classes just going through that channel. I think my video producer has made a separate little category for the TAUK classes. I'll find those and I'll send those to you so you can add them to your podcast info.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, I'll add everything and everything that everybody needs to get a hold of you and to start learning.
All right. It'll be exciting.
Thank you very much. Is there anything else you would like to share about this beautiful technique?
No, I think we covered it all. You're wonderful to do an interview with. You have beautiful insight, and I appreciate the questions that you brought to the table today.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate your time and being here, and I really hope that this can help other individuals in their own healing, because I know it's really hard, through grieving and growing and looking inward even. So I really hope this can help individuals on another level. So thank you.
I do too.
Appreciate you. And thank you very much for teaching everybody and allowing us to share this on your path. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Melanie.